Hello fellow brawlers, I'm KairosTime and it is time to brawl, and I've got some very special guests here. You guys know them as Dani and Ryan, the community managers for Brawl Stars, and I am so excited to have you guys on the channel to answer some questions about balance changes. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing awesome. What's up, Brawlers? We're really excited to be here.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Kairos, for letting us use your channel to spread this message.
Oh man, this is awesome. I'm so excited you guys wanted to do this. Now, I went and I asked people on Twitter and also on my community page what kind of questions they have regarding balance changes, and we're going to be going over some of the most frequently asked questions. And let's just go ahead and start off with, when are balance changes? Like next, when are they happening? Give us a date. I'm just kidding. I know you probably don't have a date.
But then we usually we can't schedule balance date changes because we have to be based on the current meta. And then I was talking to the guy that's actually doing the balance, and then he said that it takes around 2 weeks to see how the current balance is doing, is performing. And because 2 weeks is how the maps go to in rotation, and then you can see brawlers, how they perform in each single map. So then we can't schedule balance beforehand because we need to know how the current one is performing.
Okay, so basically, because we just recently had a big update, we had one tiny small change with Daryl. Basically what you're saying is typically take a couple of weeks to get that out, see how things are going, and then decide on balance changes.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So next round of balance will probably be in 2020.
Okay, man, that sounds like so long from now.
Only next year, yeah.
Okay, cool. So the next big question is, do you guys tend to have a schedule consistently? Is that kind of what your plan is every single update, or is it just kind of whenever you guys see things?
Kinda. So we have a target when we like to do balance, but really it depends on the data. If we see something is way off and we need to fix it sooner, then we'll fix it sooner. We won't wait. Alternatively, if the balance is looking pretty good and there aren't any major things we need to change, then we'll also wait.
Yeah, and also in case for the finals, we knew that we couldn't do a balance change right before the finals. So I think we gave around 1 week for them to adapt, something like that. So we know that we can't, we do have to follow some rules, but we don't have a specific date to do balance change.
Yeah, we'd like to avoid any kind of esports stuff so the players have time to adjust.
Absolutely. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So you're talking about the data and looking at things and seeing if there are any crazy spikes or anything like that. What exactly does determine whether a brawler gets nerfed or buffed? What do you guys look for?
Use rate, basically, the data. And then we see the use rate among all the trophy ranges. Only in PvP mode, of course. And
yeah, absolutely.
And of course, the use rate also considers if the player has the brawler, because of course, you can see that the legendary will be less used because less people has it. But we do take in consideration only people that have the brawler. So use rate is a really good indicator.
Yep, that's the main one.
Yeah.
And we do look at it across trophy ranges, so we can see if, for example, Colt is used very little at low trophies, and then there's a major spike up in high trophies, so we'll look at that also.
Okay, so I guess that does bring up another question then. What do you guys tend to focus the majority of your balancing regarding? Are you looking specifically more toward the competitive meta, the top 1 or 2% players, or are you trying to cater it toward the more casual players, the people that aren't so high in trophies?
I think I have a note here. Let me find it. We have a good example.
I think primarily we're looking at high trophy players, but if we see something weird going on where low trophy players aren't using a brawler at all, that might signal something, not necessarily about balance, but that maybe the brawler's complicated to use, or it's not intuitive, or there's some kind of mechanic that's not working. But in terms of actual normal balance changes, we're typically looking at higher trophies.
Yeah, and one good example is that it was Jessie that we just buffed recently, and she was used a lot in low trophy matches because people tend to be together, and they don't tend to dodge bullets or projectiles, and whereas for pros, they do know how to avoid Jesse and they know how to spread out. So what we did is to we increased the projectile speed. So then we made like it didn't actually change anything for the low matches because they are getting hit anyway. And
that's true. That is true.
And but for the pro, now Jesse is more viable sometimes.
So that does bring up one question that I have for like certain brawlers like 8-Bit or a Carl, where they have really high win rates because they're really strong, but they have very low use rates because they're not as fun to play as some other brawlers. So like where you guys tend to looking at use rates a little bit more often, like what do you guys tend to do for that type of situation?
So I think it is a bit subjective because I really like to play with Carl, for example.
Yeah, well, 8-Bit a little bit more than Carl, but I can see what, yeah, absolutely.
But they actually tend to be used a lot in high trophy matches. So I think even if like people don't like to play with the Brawler, they if they see that the Brawler is good, then they will use it. So the use rate still shows that.
Yeah, and I guess this question also touches on, is use rate really the best identifier for balance? So another way to say that is it possible that the use rate is low, but the Brawler is still good? And my instinct says that in very high trophy matches, players will always play with the best Brawler. Even if it's not fun, they want to win.
That's true.
And that's usually what the stats show us.
Okay, so then another question I have is your goal to make every Brawler equally viable? Or do you intentionally make certain Brawlers stronger or weaker to kind of like keep the game fresh and exciting?
So yeah, the goal is to make everyone viable, but we know that it's almost impossible, I would say.
It is impossible, yeah.
The gauntlet, the Thanos gauntlet. So perfect balance is pretty difficult.
Yeah, that's why he's evil, because it's not possible.
Get rid of all of the unbalanced Brawlers and just snap them away.
But it's mostly because it depends on the map, it depends of your comp, it depends of many things, so it's very hard to like make it equally viable all the time.
Perfectly equal, yeah. And all of your subscribers are going to hate me for this, but I always tell our balance change guy to ruin the meta, blow it up, make someone OP, make someone super weak, like completely blow up the game, because that would be really fun for me. But thankfully, he does not listen to me.
That's why he's not in charge.
Yeah.
There you go. Honestly, I know that my viewers are going to hate you and me for saying this, but I agree with you. I like things to be really up and down and exciting. Not like too crazy, but just a little bit of change. But, you know, I hear you. I hear you there. Okay, so you did mention like game modes and different maps and things like that. So let's talk about like, Colt is just an example, but he's generally weak, except for in Takedown, where he is just simply, if not the best Brawler, he's one of the best Brawlers. Buffing him to be good outside of Takedown would just make him more dominant in that one mode. And like, so like, what happens there? Are we never going to see Colt get a buff again because he's so strong in Takedown, or like what's the thought process behind the team?
I was talking about that question with the balance guy, and actually we checked data, and Colt is used above average in across all trophy range, in basically above average as well in almost all game modes as well. So he was even like joking, if there is something to change, he will probably get a nerf because he's used so much. But of course, like, he's an outlier in Takedown, and we honestly don't have a solution for that. Maybe it's the balance would be then changing something Takedown instead of changing something in the Brawler.
And occasionally we do run into Brawlers that have these troublesome abilities in certain modes. Kairos, I'm sure you'll remember back in the day, Mortis was just unstoppable in Brawl Ball. And we actually had to change the mode a little bit, so shooting the ball took an ammo bar.
So in those types of situations, maybe fixing the map or the mode seems to be the better option.
Yeah.
So at least, I mean, that's what you guys have done, and it's worked so far. So I like that. Okay. So let's take a different route here and talk about new Brawlers. Now, this doesn't always happen, but it seems like more times than not, new Brawlers tend to be a little bit on the strong side. you know, sometimes we get a little bit of a Leon, little Rosa happening in there, and they're just really, really strong. Is that by design to keep the brawlers fun and exciting, or is that just like a lack of like balance testing, or like what's your thoughts behind that?
It's definitely not by design. Like, best case scenario, we release a brawler and it's perfectly balanced. But it's really, really tough to test this in isolation. There are only, you know, how many of us are there? 10 or so people who have time to test this before an update. Yeah. And if everyone's not available, we have to play against bots. So it's a lot of guesswork and doing our very best to try and make it feel right. And there's a lot of arguing on the team. Like, I thought B was going to be super overpowered. I think Max is going to be overpowered. But B seems pretty okay.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I can totally agree with you on that, because you guys have sent me and some other content creators early access to balance changes that you guys were toying around with, and we would try something. We were like, yeah, that works. And then you guys put it live, and it's like, that did not work. Just because there's so, like, even people like us that are playing it so much, which you guys are as well, like, it's really hard to tell that. So I can sympathize with that.
But it's also like the number of people playing, because like if you have compare, like we have like a dozen of people playing here compared to a million of players. Of course they will find like something like very tricky, very specific, like Penny, Mortar in Siege or something, things like that. Or
we did not see the Penny, Mortar in Siege coming. That was a good trick.
Even like Sandy that was great, making her team invisible, and then you can just like sneak behind the system.
We caught that before it went live. We did. Okay, so then that does bring up the question, what kind of testing do you guys do before balance changes are released?
We play a lot, and as you know, we run many of our balance changes by you guys in the creator program to see your thoughts, and our balance change guys in the chat with you, and mainly we test. We look at the data a lot and test and see how it feels.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So another question a lot of people have is, does the rarity of a brawler impact the decision to balance a brawler? Like making a legendary really, really strong, or like the rare brawlers not so strong?
It doesn't influence the balance. We don't want to make legendary stronger, but we do consider their mechanics, because, for example, we don't want everyone to be invisible like Leon, because it will be just a bad experience for the new players. Imagine like it's your first day in Brawl, and then someone just appears
out of the bush
and gives you like, okay, what's happening? So
yeah, so how we think about and this isn't a golden rule, but how we generally think about the rarities is the complexity of the mechanics. So Mortis is pretty complicated. You know, he doesn't shoot anything, and his movement is somehow attached to his attack. That's a complicated mechanic. Leon goes invisible. Crow is super duper squishy and doesn't really do much damage with the hit. You know, the ticking poison is a bit more
requires
complicated.
Patience.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when I was preparing for this video, I asked the community about a lot of the things, you know, what kind of questions they have, and there were a lot of questions that were like, are you gonna buff this brawler, or why did you nerf that brawler? And you know, I'm obviously not gonna go into all of those details right now because we just don't have that time, but I do have a couple of questions. First of all, I did want to give a little bit of feedback just from the player base, and that is, first of all, I think we would really appreciate kind of like a one-line thought behind each balance change. And so I'm not, whether or not that is possible, I know that, anyway, I'll let you guys decide that. But more importantly, here's my question. How much does community input get considered if they're asking for a balance change to happen when the data might suggest a change doesn't need to happen?
Yeah, so community is definitely involved in balance changes. Dani and I are on Reddit and forums and everywhere listening to everybody's feedback and getting a general feel for, mainly my research is done by memes. So when I see the memes that someone is overpowered, then when we're talking about balance changes, we use both data and community sentiment. So if the community feels and they're talking about and they're memeing about Primo being really, really overpowered, then I take that to our balance crew and we look at the data and compare and see if we can confirm that suspicion. And if we can't, we maybe look at different trophy ranges and see, like, is there something weird going on? Why does the community feel this way?
I can just see you like pulling up a PowerPoint presentation in front of all of the employees for your Supercell and being like, El Primo meme, Leon meme. It's just like, here's what we need to do. So there we go.
Look
I
how many
love it. I love
upvotes this
it.
meme has.
Oh man, that is great. And also, just so that you guys are aware, I wanted you to know that the content creators are very frequently reading through the comments and seeing what you guys have to say about the balance changes, and we also bring up your points to the developer team, and they do see that as well. So I'm asking the question, but I want you to know that they really do listen to the community regarding really all of Brawl Stars, but specifically balance changes, absolutely.
So if you want balance changes, send memes to Kairos.
That's right. The Reddit's going to be flooded with memes now for brawlers that need to be balanced. We'll see which ones get most upvoted, and then we'll... No, just kidding.
But one thing I would like to mention is that that's why we are making this video, actually, because we can't respond to every single comment that's on your channel or anywhere. Like, it's physically impossible. But we are trying to respond massively with this video, that we actually are reading what you're saying. So don't hesitate to comment, like your comment is not being ignored or whatever. We just can't answer everyone, but we are reading you.
Absolutely. Yep. No, I absolutely hear that. I mean, I can't even answer all of my comments, so like you guys, there's just no way you could. Okay, so I've got another question. Balancing for skill, okay? And what this means, so let's talk about like Shelley, who's one of the best brawlers in lower trophies because she's really easy to play. She's the first one you pick up, you learn how to smash that auto aim button, and you just like, boom, blasting people out of the bush. Super satisfying. But once players learn how to play other brawlers, she tends to struggle, and I don't know if I'd say she's the worst brawler competitively because she does have some options in the meta, but she does struggle competitively in comparison to some other brawlers. Are brawlers like Shelley, who are really simple, kind of doomed to never be a competitive option? Because if you buff them enough to be competitive, they would just dominate even more in lower trophies and nobody would ever learn other brawlers? Or how do you handle a situation like that? Not necessarily Shelley specific, but that type of situation.
So actually Shelley is one of our
You're gonna tell me I'm wrong again.
No. But
oh, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Shelley, if I was asking like our balance guy, which brawler you think is like the most balanced brawler, and he said maybe Shelley, because Shelley can be, there's so many options for her. Any map, like even if it's like very open, she can still dodge and like can kind of hit targets from far and like until her charge her super, and then can wait. In showdown, she waits for the clouds to come, so then she's really powerful because the map gets close range. And she was actually picked in the final, so she's a really good anti-tank. For example, if you ban Ems, then Shelley is a good option to stop Rosa or Bull, or especially Heist. If you let like some Shelley keeping the safe from Bulls.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think she's doomed, and of course, like we can't predict the future. Maybe there is a new brawler where Shelley will be perfect against this new brawler, or a specific map, a specific modifier where Shelley will shine. So yeah, I don't think she would be doomed.
Okay. No, that's really good. I appreciate that. Okay, next question. Let's talk about star powers. Is it your goal to make all star powers balanced across all brawlers, like star power from one brawler is the same strength as star power from another brawler, or do you use it to balance the non-competitive meta against the competitive meta, where competitive players only are the ones that have star players or star powers?
So our goal is to make like both star powers equally used. So we aim for a 50-50% use rate
on each individual brawler.
Yeah, but we don't actually look at the competitive. We don't like make this distinction when we are balancing for star powers.
Unless something is really broken.
Yeah, we take look at outliers like 8-bit, extra life in showdown, things like that. Then we try to focus on those things. But yeah, we don't make a distinction between competitive and competitive. Non-competitive.
So you're more focused. Yeah. Gotcha. So you're more focused on making sure that the star powers are balanced between, like, the 2 star powers on each brawler is balanced, and then for balancing between competitive and non-competitive elsewhere, typically.
Right. Yeah. I guess it was another question, but what we tend to do is like we look at the trend in the community overall, but we tend to see what the competitive guys are saying because we look at their suggestions, because they usually say like you should change this, or So the actual change is based more on the competitive suggestion.
One other question: are there certain brawlers that are more difficult to balance than others?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Wait. Oh, there is a special.
So Mortis was we for how many months in a row did we nerf Mortis?
Oh, so hard.
Like, he is really
well,
really
he was
hard to
useless,
balance.
and then you gave him one buff, and then he was like so strong, and it was like nerf.
Absolutely, and I think it's because his attack is tied to his movement. So if we buffed him too much or increased his reload speed, he could dart across the map super fast, and if you go 1 inch beyond the right amount, he's incredibly overpowered. I think my gut says that Max might also be tough to balance because he's she's all about speed. So that may be another tough one. What do you think, Dani?
Yeah, especially because she can change the whole meta. Like 8-bit can run now. Like so,
normal speed 8-bit's gonna be a thing.
Yeah. He actually gets faster than normal speed.
He does, slightly faster, yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the future of Brawl Stars. So power creep is a thing in any competitive game where basically new characters kind of outshine and replace older characters. What kind of plans do you guys have to prevent that from happening with the release of new brawlers into Brawl Stars?
I think, like, of course, like, new brawlers will always be more exciting, even if they are not stronger, just because they're new. But it tends, like, to even out at some point. And for example, we again, I was talking to the balance guy, and he said that Brock was constantly picked all the time during all the since he was ever released. Brock never like was what's the opposite of outshine? Replaced. No.
He's been solid the entire time, yeah.
I guess we'll have to take it case by case, and if we see that happening, we'll have to adjust. And we can always buff brawlers that have been around for a longer time. And since it's based on use rates, we can always compensate for that.
Yeah.
So one other question I have for those of you guys that are not familiar with like Clash Royale and how they do their balance changes, they do a set schedule for each season, and then you know when balance changes are going to happen. Sometimes it's kind of sometimes they even make balance changes based off of like community votes and things like that. Now I know that Clash Royale is a different game than Brawl Stars, but do you guys have any plans to like kind of adapt what they've done over in Clash Royale over to Brawl Stars, or tell us about how that works in Supercell?
I think Seth is doing a great job on Royale and their balancing. I think the game has been more balanced than it ever has been before, which is really nice. But for us, scheduling is really hard. We like to be agile. We like to be able to make changes when they're needed, which also can be sooner. So we don't want to have to wait for a predetermined date in the month for some arbitrary reason. We'd rather move quickly. And alternatively, if the balance is really nice and there aren't any major problems, we don't want to force some kind of change just for the sake of it.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay, awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on to the video. Do you guys have any other more questions that you want to answer? Like
us?
Like when the next like Brawler is gonna be released? Just thinking.
Well, the next.
Don't worry, I won't tell Frank. I'm just kidding.
The next Brawler will be released tomorrow because they're. Oh, actually, I can actually say that because it will be already released when this video is up. Max.
Max, that's right.
Yeah, you might want to say yesterday.
Oh.
Or
yesterday.
Well,
something like that.
They know how show
Max was released soon or will be or has in the past.
This is not live, guys.
That's awesome. No, I really appreciate it. You guys coming on to the channel. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the community before we end this video?
Yes. If you see like balance questions around every channel, like you can just say, you can share this video with them. Like if you ask like why Leon got another nerf, why Mortis doesn't get a buff, share this video.
If anyone asks when the next balance changes are, post this video in the comments.
That's right. Like, subscribe, retweet, share, follow, comment, yeah, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
No, you guys are fantastic. I really appreciate the time that you guys are taking to try and be a little bit more involved with the community, and I'm sure that everybody else does as well. So thank you very much, guys. For now, this is Dani, Ryan, and KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in Brawl Stars.
Bye-bye.